Welcome, everybody. I'm on the beach, and I know they don't believe that. Welcome to Astrology Unplugged. Tonight we talk about full moons, etc. Good to have you. Thank you for joining us on YouTube. We're the ones that are here live. So I told you after Ksenia went away that I'd have to come back to boring old me. So you're stuck with boring old me. That's the sun, that's the moon. That's the sun, that's the moon, and that's sun, moon, earth. So that's my graphics tonight. This is a very good topic. I covered it a long time ago, but I think some people didn't see it. And it's a really good topic to bring up because people that don't know astrology, they know two things. They know that Mercury retrograde is weird. I don't know why. And they know about full moons. As a matter of fact, most people know more about full moons and new moons than I do because I don't watch them. Because I'm so busy watching Pluto and Saturn and the big heavyweights that I just don't watch the inner planets very much. I do keep an eye on them when I need to. But little is really known. Little is really known about what a full moon, what a new moon is, what a lunation is. In astrology, they're called the lights. The lights are the sun and the moon. They're the planets, and then there's the lights. Okay? Fortunately for you, in basic astrology, there aren't that many terms, really. It's only when you get more complex. And if you get Hindu, it goes off the chart. Okay. When we talk about lunations, I want you to get a good grip of this tonight because a lunation is nothing more than a full moon or a new moon or an eclipse. So using my planets here. Okay. All right. All that a full moon is these three planets line up from looking from above. Looking from above. When they line up all directly like a skewer, that's an eclipse. That's the difference. That's why when eclipses are forming the month before, the month after, the sun and the moon are always setting on the ecliptic, on the horizon. Okay, when the sun and moon are not near the ecliptic, that means you're far away from an eclipse. When they all line up in a skewer formation, that's an eclipse, and that's why you get these maps in the paper that tell you it's only happening on a certain part of the Earth, because it is. It just happens to be rather miraculous that when you line up the moon in between or the earth in between, they're about the same size. That's just happenstance. Okay, let's get started. There shall be never misses a class. Does she do that for other shows?
She doesn't even come when I'm teaching classes.
She just kitty.
I can sit there for 3 hours teaching a class, and she's nowhere to be found. The minute she hears your voice, she comes running.
Come on, Shelby, the moon cat. Okay, all right. Now, people don't understand lunations for many reasons. The one number reason is when it hits the papers and it hits this awful thing called the internet. They make this great big deal of the blood moon and the harvest moon, and they talk about how close the moon is and the perigee and the apogee and all that. But what they don't understand, because they're not deeper into astrology, is they got to keep track of what sign is it happening in. If it's a full moon, that means the moon is opposite the sun, the earth is in the middle. And if it's a full moon, the moon is happening in another sign, which is opposite sun sign. If it's a new moon, the sun and moon are together with the earth on the outside. And the sun and moon are conjuncting in the zodiac in a sign. So new moons, the sun and moon are in a sign practically once every month. There are 13 per year. The full moon is always opposite where the sun is. And an eclipse is the same thing, except it's lined up as a skewer, like I told you. And it's not only lined up this way, it's lined up this way. That's why it's so powerful. So the thing people don't understand is you gotta, in other words, you can have a new moon tonight in Pisces, and everybody goes, oh, well, the new moon is in Pisces. It's going to be romantic, and it's going to be kind of dreamy. It's going to be kind of drifty. But what they're not noticing at certain times is the new moon is next to Uranus. So not only do you have the new moon and the lunations happening in signs, you have them making aspects to the other planets. That's why some ER rooms will talk about, well, my God, it was really busy this weekend in the ER room because it was a full moon. That's not the reason why. The full moon's a small part of it, but what sign was involved? Was the full moon square to Uranus? Was it square to Mars? Were there a lot of car wrecks? Was it aspecting nothing? You've all seen full moons happen and nothing happens in your life. And you go by and you go, wonder what that is. And then you see another one come by and, oh, all hell's breaking loose. That's because the aspects that the full moon or new moon or the lunation are making to other planets. So, if we're to take a look at where the planets are right now, all right, let's take a look at where the planets are right now. Okay. So we just had the moon back here at 22 degrees. I think it was last night, 21 degrees. When the moon was at 21 degrees, let me take it back and actually show you this, because when it was going back by hours, '22. Okay, when this is when the full moon occurred. When the sun was at 21, the earth is in the middle, and the moon was at 21. Now you'll notice that this is happening, this axis is happening 6 degrees from Pluto. Now, it's my opinion through years of research that you use about a 5-degree orb when you're studying lunations. So this full moon is going to be completely different since it's happening 6 degrees from Pluto, other than this full moon, if this full moon were 25 or 26.
Excuse me, Rick, wasn't it the July the 13th, not the 14th, right? Because you got the.
Well, I'm
lunar
not gonna, I'm
10 there.
not gonna,
Oh, I thought you were
I'm not
gonna do
gonna
that.
fuss with the hour clock. Yeah, you're right. You're exactly right. It was within that day, depending on where you are in America. But the point is that when the full moon is exact, they look at where the moon was, and that moon was at 21, 6 degrees away from Pluto. Now, one way of measuring the moon travels about 1 degree every 2 hours. It's a real good way of keeping track of what the moon does. Once per 2 hours. The sun once per day, 1 degree per day. So 6 degrees, 12 hours later, or at 2:11 in the morning on the 14th, the moon caught up with Pluto. So you got to keep an eye on the orb. Now, very, very important. Now, if there's nothing that the sun and moon are lined up with, and there's nothing square to it, then that new moon is rather weak. Then you take a look at what sign it's happening. And when you look at the sign, that's why some signs are aggressive. The new moon is in Aries. The new moon is in Taurus. Everybody's out buying a bottle of wine. The new moon's in Gemini. Everybody's going to shopping malls and shopping and going all over the place. And you're doing Gemini type things. So the sign is very important. It's the least important. The aspects are really important. Like if it's lined up with Mars, if it's lined up with Neptune. That's why you got to really be smart when you read these weekend astrologers who are telling you about how violent this new moon in Aries is going to be. They're telling about this new moon in Aries and watch for fights and all, but they're not telling you that the new moon is square to Neptune, which mitigates that fact. So if the new moon is lined up with Neptune, the Neptune energy overwhelms the new lunation, and it sends that Neptune influence to Earth. It overwhelms all charts. Now you got to remember that the new moon is hitting in a chart by itself. The new moon is hitting in a different place in your chart or your chart or your chart. So you got to keep all this in mind. So mainly what you do is in the full moon, you look at the moon's placement. The new moon, you look at the sun's placement. Sun and moon are the same place. Every 3 months or so, every month, there's always a new moon and a full moon, and sometimes two of each, or two, 1 and 2, or 1, 2, and 2. And that's why you get 13 lunations per year, because a true calendar would have 28 days in it, and there would be 13 months. If you had 13 months and 28 days, you come out to 366 days a year. It's almost perfect. So the real calendar should have 13 months. Okay. So when you're looking for what is the new moon going to feel like, what sign is it in? What house is it hitting in your chart? What house is it hitting in the United States chart? Now, I've told you before that the United States is going through a Pluto return. You got to remember things, the major stuff. The United States is going through 264 years later, 246 years later. Pluto's come back around to the 28th degree of Capricorn. In 1776, the moon and the sun were, I'm sorry. Pluto was at 28 degrees Capricorn. Now, let me show it to you on the screen. It's easier to keep you from getting confused. All right. I use several different USA charts. Okay. Now we're looking at the USA's chart. All right. When Pluto went around the 246 years to go all the way around, all the years of the history of the United States, and Pluto just returned, Well, the whole time Pluto is near there, that's just like I told you. Somebody parked a great big truck full of dynamite next to your house, next to your garage, which has a bunch of dynamite in it. That's how you look at the Pluto return. That's a big deal. That's a big deal. As opposed to 10 years ago when Pluto was back here, 10 years from now when Pluto's up here. Now, while the Pluto is returning, it goes back and forth like this for the next couple of years. That's just how the outer planets move. Well, what do you think happens if a new moon comes along over here? Or full moon happens and it's over here? Nothing. What do you think happens if a new moon or a full moon happens here at 28? Or a lunation happens here at 29? Okay, now you're getting the story. So when new moons happen, new moons are triggers. The triggers in astrology are Mars, the sun and moon, lunations. Sometimes the moon will trigger, but it'll usually trigger the minute that something happens. Your big triggers in the zodiac are the sun and sun and moon and Mars. Sun and moon and Mars. So if you've got a dynamite truck sitting next to your garage, which is open, and it's got a bunch of open packages in it with a bunch of dynamite in it, you really don't want a lot of people messing around in your alley. Common sense. Well, what do you think's going to happen? Now, once the Pluto return moves on, or that truck moves away from your house and things happen in your area, it's not so threatening. But that's why an astrologer is able to pinpoint those dates. I've told you guys of dates years in advance, years ahead, and I'll be within a day or two of being accurate. Because it's no magic. It's just I know where the planets are going to be, how they're lined up with each other, and along comes a trigger. Along comes Mars. Mars at a right angle. Mars opposite. Mars conjunct. That's how we do it. So we got to get down to talking about cycles, because cycles are really, really important in astrology. And not enough is talked about them, and they're glossed over. This is why you start a job and they put you on 90-day probation, because that's a fourth of a cycle. The sun is going through, all cycles have the same qualities. They just have different lengths of time, different types of energy, because the planets are different. So you start a job, 90 days later, they call you in to say, boy, Claudia, you've been doing an excellent job. We think we're going to keep you. Or you haven't been doing as well as we wanted. We think we're going to release you, put you on a 90-day trial. That's because 90-day opening squares are trial periods. The opening square of Mars, 6 months later to Mars, Sun to Sun after 3 months, Saturn to Saturn after 7 years, Uranus to Uranus after 21 years. It's an opening half or square or quarter of the entire cycle. So a full moon is a half a cycle. A whole full moon is similar to a midlife crisis, because a midlife crisis, Uranus has gone halfway around. It's facing itself. Half of this cycle, 42 years. A full moon, 2 weeks. 2 weeks after it was new. So it's the same theory. When the opening square to something happens, whether it's Saturn at 7 years in your marriage, whether it's 21 years and you're trying to grow up and leave your home at age 21 and go get drunk and go vote, hopefully not on the same day. Matter of fact, I think a lot of people have been doing just that. Oh boy. The opening square is the opening challenge. when two planets are together, you see, you don't realize this, but when you have a square in your chart, say Mars square Saturn, you don't realize that that square, it's either opening or closing. That square is about to close and conjunct again, or it's just opening. If it's opening, that means it was conjunct a while ago. If you got Mars square Saturn, that is the opening square to the place it was when it conjuncted. And an opening square is a challenge. How is this thing working? I'm going to find the weak spot. Let's shake this and see if it works. See if it blows up. Let's shake this marriage. See how you're doing at 7 years. The opposition, whether it's a full moon, or whether it's Uranus opposite Uranus, or whether it's Saturn opposite Saturn at age 14, the opposition is, okay, now you've decided to keep going along on this same path. Are you going to continue on this path? That's why a lot of these lunations bring about negative experiences. They don't all. Some of them are wonderful. But a lot of these lunations bring about negative experiences because the entity itself is being tested. Now, at the square point, you usually get a mini crisis. Let's say in the marriage, 7 years, and you've been getting along really well for 6 years, and you really start fighting your first 7 years. Well, you get into these periods and you try to work it out, maybe get some therapy, read some books, whatever, and hopefully you work it out. Well, as you get on into the 8th, 9th, 10th, 11th, 12th year, it gets easier because there's not as much stress. And this is coming from another planet. When it gets to 14, well, your marriage had better be in good shape. Because at 14, you've got the natal 7th house involved. All oppositions have to do with the 1st house and the 7th house. All of them. It's the natal of oppositions. So at 14, you have decided back at 7 that you're going to pretty much stay the course. You're not going to change much. So at 14, those same problems you had are going to come about again. And you're going to have to decide, well, do we need to really change course? Again, modify a course or stick with it? Are we okay? And a lot of people keep going. So similar things happen at the closing square and at the new moon, which is, if it's Uranus, it comes back at age 84. If it's Saturn, it comes back at age 29, age 58. If it's Jupiter, it comes back at age 12, at age 24, at age 36. That's why you have to memorize the speed of these planets. And it's not that hard because there aren't that many. Okay. So orb is everything. Not only are we looking to see, well, here comes a new moon this weekend and it's fine, but next month's new moon is right on my Neptune. Ooh, okay, so you get ideas of what that might mean because you mix together the sun, the moon, the sign it's happening in, and your Neptune. You mix it all together into a mud pie. And you say next month, by God, the new moon's only 1 degree from my natal Neptune. Now, I will guarantee you this. You don't hear me say that very often, but I've watched it enough. You get a crook in DC who's got the hand in the till and they're doing stuff underneath the table, and you watch and see if a new moon, a lunation comes by and hits their Neptune. Let's say they're being questioned in front of Congress. They're going to be questioned 2 weeks from now in front of Congress. And this new moon is forming near their Neptune. Bye-bye. When the lights shine on your Neptune, do you think you're going to be able to keep your affair with your secretary quiet? If the new moon's happening 30 degrees away from your Neptune, probably. That's how it works. There are books and books and books written about this. So if you've got especially if you have a political person that you're watching, keep your eye on their Neptune. Also, if I'm running against Erica and her Neptune is in the middle of Capricorn, where my sun is, you can see why she doesn't like running against me. My sun shines on her Neptune. Neptune's what you're trying to keep hidden. My sun's shining on your Neptune. You better put up some double walls to keep me away from getting my camera in your backyard. So it's just common sense over and over and over and over and over with astrology. It's the same stuff over and over and over. So if you'll take a look what solar fire has to offer, you'll see here. In solar fire, you've actually got a eclipse button. You can't see it there. Okay, there's the eclipse button. I'm asking solar fire to look from the whole year of 2022. Take the whole year. You can use this for 500 BC, 75,000 AD. It doesn't matter. It's how accurate it is. And search for the eclipses in the year 2022. Look here. You hit one button and it tells you, these are the following 4 eclipses for this year. There's a solar, a lunar, a solar, a lunar. These are the degrees of the zodiac, when it's going to happen, where it's going to happen. This is the time it's going to happen. This is the date that it's going to happen. So we can see that the one we got coming up, we got one coming up in Scorpio on October 25th, which I told you about a couple weeks ago, how dangerous those days are in late October. Here comes an eclipse at 2 degrees of Scorpio. It will be at 10 something in the morning. It will be a solar partial eclipse. So you know what that means? That means just certain parts of the Earth will be able to see it. And even then, they'll only see part of the moon will be overshadowed by the sun. Or part of the sun will be overshadowed by the moon. Then all you got to do is double click on it, and there's your chart. For that particular eclipse, is coming October 25th. Here's the sun and moon eclipsing. It's at the same degree. And you see, this is why it's not good to use a computer. The computer will show you the sun and moon together, but you have no idea if it's an eclipse or not. Solar fire doesn't say this is an eclipse. It does now because I'm looking for them. In the book, when you use the ephemeris, it shows you the eclipses. So when you see a sun and moon together or opposite each other, it's your job to intentionally go look in the book or other tools on the computer to see, is this an eclipse or not? Because eclipses are far heavier than normal lunations. So when we come back here, this is the eclipse that's coming. Okay, now you got to say to yourself, well, what's the big deal about this? Number one, this is in the sign of Scorpio. So you know it's going to be intense. The energy is basically intense. Secondly, Venus is right there with it. Oh, isn't that nice? That's a nice thing. You got sun, moon, and Venus. Children born during this time are going to be very, very charming. Okay? Keep an eye on this because all three of them are square to Pluto. Ooh. Now we got a triple Scorpio with the sun, moon, and Venus all square to Pluto. And since we're watching Eris, and Eris is 24, we're getting an opposition of sun, moon, and Venus opposite Eris with a T-square to Pluto. Now you're creeping up on the eclipse that Ksenia was telling you about on November 7th on election day is the answering eclipse to this one. It's a lunar eclipse because when solar eclipses happen, there's a lunar before it or after. They come in pairs. There's always a lunar and a solar or a solar and a lunar. Always, sometimes 3 in a row. So now we can go forward 2 weeks. Let's go forward 2 weeks after that. Let's go to the election day, which is November 7th, I think.
November 8th.
November 8th. Thank you. And you see I'm a little bit off here. So let's go back by hours. Okay. Here's the election day, 7 o'clock in the morning. The sun is now opposite the moon. So now it's not a solar eclipse, it's a lunar eclipse.
We can't see it.
Thank you for telling me. Okay. Now you got the sun and moon opposite each other, right? Venus is still involved. Mercury's now involved. Now you got Mercury, sun, Venus, moon, and Uranus, all 5 square to Pluto or Saturn. Remember 2 weeks earlier, these were all squaring Pluto. Now they've moved on. Now they're all squared to Saturn. This is the one that she was showing you during her show last week. 3 planets in Scorpio, opposite 2 in Taurus, T-squared to Saturn at the 18th, 19th degree of Aquarius. So my dears, if you have planets, angles, midheavens, around the 18th degree of Aquarius, what do you think is going to happen? It does not mean I'm bringing you bad news in this area. Follow me now. We got 5 planets square to Saturn. A bad astrologer would say, oh, an eclipse is coming and the moon's going to eclipse the light of the sun and the natives are going to go nuts because it's going to get dark and that area of your life is going to get dark. It's not like that. My ex-wife at the time, I taught her a lot of astrology. She would always get on me every eclipse. What's it going to do? What's it going to do? What's it going to do? I don't know. I don't know what an eclipse is going to do. And if you know somebody that does, please invite them on my show, unasked. Okay? Now, what I have found, see, this is why I've been trying so hard to teach you. Don't guess, find out, research. So when an eclipse happens, I look and see, did bad things happen in my 3rd house? Did bad things happen with Uranus? What happened? This is how you learn. It's how you learn. Okay, now what I have found out is usually something really bad happens during that time. Usually. But it's usually turned over real quickly by something good. How many of you have things in your life that are teetering? They're up for grabs. You're not sure. You're not sure how it's going to break out, how it's going to form. That's what a lunation is really good for. It will break the tedium, and by God, something will happen. Now, our Taurus resident here raises her hand. Tauruses don't want it to break. They don't want it to break free. They want the damn tedium to last forever because they're just really good at tedium. And a whole lot of signs aren't good at tedium, but Taurus really is. Meanwhile, our Libra is holding her mouth. She's laughing and chuckling. Okay. Now, what I'm telling you, let's just say my girl and I are about to fight. I can feel it. It's been going on for about a week. It's this issue we don't want to talk about. Here comes this eclipse in my seventh house. Now, maybe during that eclipse, depending on the nature of the planets, we'll fight like hell during that time and get stuff off our chest. This has been bugging me. This has been bugging you. Okay, you get it out. Well, it can appear to be bad, but the next thing you know, the air is clear. The air is clear. So then how can you tell me beforehand whether a new moon or an eclipse is going to be good or bad? You can't. It will be bad the more you have buried. See that sand behind me? See the ocean? See that sand? I've got it back there in the ocean. The more you have buried, the more shit's going to hit the fan. Yes. And that's why, drum roll, and that's why America's got so much shit on the table right now because of the Pluto return that us astrologers have been telling everybody about it for years. We knew exactly the minute it was going to happen years ago. The computers told us. That's why I told you years before how the downfall of the GOP was coming to them in 2018 with the Neptune return. So when you ignore the zodiac, it's symbolic of you ignoring your own life. You know that. We all talk with youngins and we say, well, someday it's going to catch up with you, honey. It's going to catch up with you. Same thing. It's the same thing. If you're really good at life, you don't need an astrologer. You don't need to know where your planets are. You can sense this stuff coming. But that's one thing that I've really noticed with lunations. Usually something bad happens and then it's followed by some kind of relief. Now let's get to my Kansas Sagittarian.
So, dumb question, I'm sure.
No, it's not.
Well, on November 8th, the sun is opposite the moon. So what house is this eclipse happening in?
Okay. Now, that's a really good question.
Okay.
Houses are definitely related to what time the eclipse is.
Right.
So when you do an eclipse for the world, you do all eclipses for Greenwich, England. There has to be a center on the earth for astrology, which is 0 degrees longitude, which goes through the heart of London. So you do the main eclipse chart, like when they write these books, the eclipse is coming in August for the planet. That eclipse is written for Greenwich, England, because that's the figurable, literal center of the earth. Okay? And though the houses that those eclipses fall in will have some truth revealed to you, say about the third house, that will be a third house in for the whole planet. Now, in your chart, if I put it on Susan's chart, you may be hitting in her 8th house.
Well, which side though? The sun side or the moon side?
It doesn't matter. An eclipse is lighting up both ends.
Okay.
Okay. If you have not noticed this yet, one of the main things I've been doing with you for 6 years is I've been teaching you constantly about we and they, we and they, we and they, we and they. I'm teaching you this sign, that sign, Aries, Libra, Taurus, Scorpio. I'm constantly teaching you that because that's how it is.
Right.
If you want a junkie astrologer, then just focus on one. But the tension that's going on between two signs is so important to understand. One is just the me part of it, and the other part is a we part of it. That's all it is. So, dear Susan, if you have an eclipse coming in Sag, well, this eclipse is coming in Scorpio. It's coming in your 9th house. It's also coming in your 3rd house, right?
Yeah, the sun part of this eclipse is going to hit a sensitive point.
That's right. Okay, that's exactly. Well, let's not fool around. We got plenty of time. Let's pull your chart up if you don't mind.
Sure.
You're always game. Okay, let's so okay. Okay, so here's the chart. Here's your chart. Okay, now we have just stated that the new moon is going to appear in Scorpio with all the planets in Taurus, remember? All the planets are in Scorpio, a bunch of planets are down in Taurus with the T-square to Saturn on the ascendant. This is an excellent example. Now, let me give you an example of what's going to happen. Now, I'll show you what we got to do. First, we have to make another chart for the moment of the eclipse. Here's the eclipse. November 8th. We got that chart all saved. All right. Now, we go to a double chart. We put Susan's chart. We put that eclipse on the outside. No, we don't want that. We want to go to this and this and this. Okay, now we see the natal chart is in the middle. This is her natal chart that never changes. These are her two Scorpio planets that we're often referring to. We have now moved forward to the day of the election. The sun and moon are now eclipsing at the 16th degree with Mercury, with Venus, with the sun, with the moon, with Uranus, all making a gigantic T-square to Saturn on your ascendant. Okay, now we got about 7,000 chapters to talk about just with that right there. With that 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 planets involved. Okay, so the natural tension that's happening with the full moon is the tension that's going wrong in the 9th house, 3rd house, 9th house, 3rd house. So what's that tension mean? Well, you're not going to be able to answer it unless you know what the 9th house and the 3rd house is. That's why I'm always teaching you in pairs. 3rd house, 9th house is, am I thinking the way my philosophy is? Is my philosophy matching what I think? Am I talking my talk? Am I walking my walk? Okay, that's how it's going to appear. Okay, because that's where the attention is. But the T-square is going to Saturn on the ascendant. Whoa, the big major focal points all going through Saturn on your ascendant. You see that?
Yeah.
Okay, what does Saturn do on the ascendant? Remember, Saturn's in Aquarius. We looked it up last week. We found out that the 19th degree of Aquarius is a pretty good degree. But I'll tell you right now, when Saturn's in the early degrees of the ascendant or 1st house, it's a time of new promises, of weight loss, quitting smoking, taking care of myself. I'm going to renew myself. I'm going to go exercise, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera.
Right.
Okay, so something may happen to you. I'm not going to predict during that eclipse that shows, oh my God, I really haven't been getting with it. Or you might get some experiences during that eclipse that says, boy, thank God I've been exercising recently. But the focus is now on that Saturn. Because why? Because Saturn does what?
Make sure.
That's
Check.
exactly right. That's exactly right. And so many astrologers have it wrong. It's Saturn. It's going to be bad, Susan. It's Saturn. It's going to be bad. It's not going to be bad.
Right.
It's just if you're not making sure and you're not following through,
Right.
and the pounds aren't just falling off by you walking by the refrigerator. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
You got to do your work with Saturn. That's how Saturn is.
Right.
So this is a really good example. Let's talk about some more about this because you got so many planets involved. So you got the lunation, and don't be deceived by these scattering of planets. The lunation's happening at 16. 16 is right on Saturn. It's right next to 15. It's right opposite these two. This is a major eclipse to you. Now, I'm going to tell you something. This is a real big deal. And when eclipses hit like this, usually a lot of things get involved. And you get the square to Saturn on the ascendant. Okay? Now, with the third house and ninth house, here you are living for 2 years in your Winnebago going around the country, right? And the ninth house is very much about that, traveling around the country. Why are you doing that? Because it really matches what Sagittarians are. Exploring, taking the dogs, having a good time. You worked your whole life. You're out exploring, right?
Mm-hmm.
What this might do for you, because another thing that lunations do, another thing that full eclipses do, is they give you insight. Watch how during an eclipse or a full moon happens. Watch how you're awake one night and all of a sudden you sit up in bed and you're just clarity of mind. You can see clearly. These planets are not throwaway energies out in the dark matter. They're symbolic of your own consciousness.
So we didn't have an eclipse the last night or two, but we did have a full moon.
That was an eclipse.
It was or was not?
It was.
Okay.
It was an eclipse, but it was, I think,
Last
Weird.
night, I don't think last night was an eclipse.
no, I'm wrong. It was a lunation.
Okay.
But even though it's a lunation, it's still going to give you insight. When it comes to eclipse points, it gets much more major.
I had some powerful waking dreams.
That's right. That's exactly right.
Right.
You'll go to that point in the chart and you can see what was being lit up, just like a flashlight. It's shining in your corner. It's shining in the corner of your mind. That's
Right.
exactly right. So with the ninth house being lit up and your third house being lit up, and you got months away and your Saturn's going to hit it, it's a very strong indicator that you may make up a very major life-changing decision. Because Saturn on the ascendant is my life going the way I want it?
Right.
Is my life going in accord with my ninth house, third house? My philosophies, my thoughts, my thinking. Now, what do you think about this?
I've already started thinking about the exit strategy.
Okay. No, you
And I
don't
don't-
have to, but you may want to.
I may want to, and I
maybe
don't
the
know
proper
if-
time.
Yeah.
It might also be a proper time for you to decide that you're going to do this once a year. You may get a little house and go on a trip for 6 months a year, come back to the house. I mean,
That's the exit strategy,
Yeah.
basically.
yeah, that's a very good idea for you. It's a very good idea.
Right.
But when you break it down, you'll start to see how astrology gets involved because your ninth house is very scorpionic. That means that you have very serious, big time intense philosophies in life. And over in your third house is more of a mind that is a daily mind. Get the shopping list done, get the car repaired, is a daily type of thing. Then when it all sends its square over to Saturn on the ascendant,
Yeah, that's the part that I don't quite get.
that's the part that's very humanitarian. It's Saturn in Aquarius. You're going to start to see, how do I fit in with all the people on Earth? How do I fit in with what's going on with all the people on Earth?
Right.
That's why the whole triangle is so major. And I'm telling you that triangle, that T-square, is largely formed from the story you get in your 12th harmonic.
Oh, okay.
So your whole life, that Saturn is there natally, right?
I'm sorry.
The Saturn is there natally.
Saturn is in Scorpio natally.
Oh, it's not there. Okay. Yeah, it's up here. It's gone from here to here. Okay, so this is temporary. All right.
Right.
So this is not natally. All right. All right. But when Saturn crosses the ascendant, that's a whole nother major book. Saturn crossing the ascendant means it's just finished going through 12 houses.
Right.
It's now getting ready to start anew. So and I've done lectures on this and videos on this. Saturn's transits through the 12 houses. So largely what's happening for your case, not others, is Saturn coming out of the midheaven where you're successful 7 years ago, 5 years ago, you're successful. Saturn goes into your 12th house. In the last 3 years, your life starts to fall apart. You in a good way, you start to get detached from life, detached from your plans. I don't know these schools anymore. I don't know these kids, all this stuff anymore. You start detaching from it. As Saturn crosses the ascendant, it's time to start building new. It's time to start building new. And it usually starts with the body when it's in the early first house. And you'll go on to first house, second house, third house. And Saturn goes through those 7 years as you rebuild a new you and hits the bottom of the chart in 7 years, then you start on your way back up again. Very accurate timing tool, very much consistent amongst people. But you can see in this case that so many things are involved. Now, if you have, let me just show you here. It's very complex. It just is. If you have had trouble all your life with Venus, Saturn, Moon, in other words, how can you, one way that you can gauge what's going to happen to you is to go back through your life with a notebook and with solar fire and go back and see what happened when the planets hit here. What happened when the planets hit here? What happened when the planets hit here? What happened when the planets hit here? Okay, every quadrant that gets hit, you'll start to notice the themes in your life. Oh, this has always involved my grandpa, or this has always involved the army, or whatever. It's always involved my fight against alcohol, whatever it is. See, these things don't come out of nowhere, and that's why it's so important that you go back and you analyze your chart by reversing the planets and say, what did Uranus do when it hit there? What did Uranus do when it hit here? What did it do when it hit here? And don't let yourself get lost in, well, Bill did this and Mary did that, and I shouldn't have let Bill do that. But don't get lost in that story.
Just looking for themes.
Pull back and look at the patterns that happened in your life, because your birth chart is revealing itself. Does that make sense? So we know We know for a fact that Saturn has just recently gotten to your first house. So that means what? That means in the past year or two, you've really started to get to an overall overreaching overview of your life.
Well, also if it's physical stuff and Saturn is bones, right?
Saturn is bones, it's
Broke a
teeth.
leg a little over a year ago.
That's true. Saturn is hard parts, bones, knees, teeth,
Right?
skin, all the joints. But the point is, as Saturn's getting there, it looks to me like if you were my client and we were working together earnestly, I would be pointing out to you, you've been doing really well with this. You've not just been going on the road to run from your problems. You've been going on the road in a lot of ways to face yourself.
Right.
So those are really good things. So do you see how complex it can get? And you see how hard it is to be an astrologer.
Yes.
It just is.
Yeah.
But that's why you do a little bit at a time, and you use a pencil.
Yeah, in my case, running away is relief. Sitting in one spot is scary as hell. Well, right.
Well, that's a very Sag Gemini thing to do too.
Right.
You know, to get out away from the tension and get away from it and go have some fun somewhere.
Right.
That's in other signs like Taurus are the opposite. Okay, let's stop for a minute. I want to open this up to the group. As a group, you've all seen a really good example of how these things work. Now, other eclipses will be different because they'll be in different signs. They'll be making different aspects. They'll be making different aspects in your chart. Sometimes they're not making any aspects in your chart. But usually, and I'm pretty good at this one, usually you use 5 degrees. So let me explain to you how this works. If the full moon's happening at 1 degree, and you got a planet at 6, it's a 5-degree orb. So what will usually happen, that's why I tell people what I do when I write my documents and warnings to people. The full moon's at 1, you got a planet at 6. 4 days later, when that planet gets to 5 is when the event will happen. The sun always triggers when it's a degree away, just like Mars. The sun and Mars trigger the event when it's a degree away. Now, you're watching the news and there's trouble in the Middle East and the sun gets to 2 degrees and the president says this when he gets to 3 degrees and the Russian leader says this when he gets to 4 degrees. But when it gets to a degree away, that's when the S hits the fan. That's how we were so accurate with January 6th. We had it right on the day, months before. It had to happen then, because if the planets aren't there, the event can't happen. If the planets aren't there, the event cannot happen. So when the sun gets to 5 and the other planets at 5 or 6, that'll be the height of it. And then they're exact, and that can be detrimental too. But then when it gets past and it starts to pass by the exact point, things start to calm down, usually. So again, I got an eclipse coming at 10 and my natal Uranus is at 12. Well, that's going to be really impactful right away, but especially the next day at 11, when it's a degree away, that's when it really triggers. You can feel it in your bones. You can feel the shaking going on inside your nervous system. So if it's hitting 10 degrees away and it moves 9 degrees away and it's now 1 degree away, you may feel some stuff. But if it hits within 5 and then it inches its way up, it gets to 1 degree away, and they all say, well, what happened at 5 degrees? You said it's going to be a big deal. No, I said it's going to be a big deal when it's a degree away. So a degree away from what? You have to be looking at, is it the natal Pluto in the United States chart? Is it the natal Neptune in the GOP's chart? What's the target? Shelby's getting nervous. I think she thinks that something's happening in her chart. Her chart, Mom. You better take a look. Help me out, Mom. So it's just the same old with astrology. You keep combining the meaning of the signs, the meaning of the planets, and then you learn some new tricks along the way about the dynamics of how these transits work, the dynamics of how a full moon forms, etc., etc. So if you look at the United States chart, okay, there's the United States chart. Now we're going to put the United States chart in the eclipse. You know it's going to be something to the nation because it's the eclipse during the election. So let's look at what the eclipse is going to do to the country's chart. Right? That's a realistic thing to do. All right. So in terms of the United States chart, the eclipse is happening in the 5th house. When you're looking at the 5th house of a country, it's different than a person. The 5th house is about, in the 5th house and 11th house, is about the people taking action, the people becoming active, people becoming dynamic, people shouting out. This abortion issue is going to become huge. 5th house is about your children, the country's children. The abortion issue is going to become enormous because you've got the sun right next to the moon and Uranus and Venus and Mercury, all these things at once. And the cooler heads that we hope prevail will be coming from the Saturn placement because all this energy is going to be sent down to Saturn in the 2nd house. We don't know what that means yet, but something's going to happen at the 18th, 19th degree of Aquarius, and that's where we're going to look for the cooler heads to prevail upon this powerful impact of this here. Now, one thing you do when you look at the eclipse, you analyze the chart by itself. Let's look at the United States chart. What's the natural story going on in the United States between the 5th and the 11th? Well, there's not much going on, is there? There's not much trouble going on between the 5th and the 11th house, as opposed to if it were happening along the era sun, etc., etc. So we'll just look at 5th house, 11th house matters. And that's why you'll see a lot of astrologers talking about 5th house issues, the children, 11th house groups. So you can bet your bippy this is going to have a lot to do with the abortion laws. What are you doing there with your gun, Linda?
I think also guns because of school shootings.
Well, yeah, I would say so. With the natal Uranus, when you're hoping for the cooler heads to sit down on top of the guns, then you're looking for all the pressure on Saturn. And what is Saturn in Aquarius saying about the guns? Saturn in Aquarius is saying, look, said this is where Saturn gets most famous for its ice ring around. We need to put a ring around these volatile guns, like Iceland did, like many ice countries did. They did away with their guns. But it's a hard issue because the USA is a very childish country. It's very childlike. You're not taking my toy. You try to explain it to them. Did you ever notice the adults sitting in the cafes having discussions in Finland and in France? And then look at the discussions Americans are having at lunch. I mean, it's just embarrassing. So we have a lot of calendar pages to flip before the Pluto return starts to ebb at all. Because that Saturn in Aquarius is, let's do this for the good of all of us. Let's do this for the good of all of us. And that's not what a Cancer country says. That's what a Saturn in Aquarius country says. Do you understand? Okay. Any questions?
I got a quick question, Rick.
You better make it real fast.
Okay, maybe I shouldn't because it might not be so quick.
Take your time.
Something really big has happened to me. It's all week it's been going on, and I just wondered if my chart shows anything that I should be aware of.
Well, what do you think is going to show in your chart or not? Something big is happening to you? Of course it'll show in your chart, yes.
All right, maybe you've answered my question. So
They are one and the same, John.
all right.
Your life and your chart are the same thing. No difference.
Answered
Now,
it.
if you want to get a little more revelatory, we can look a little deeper. If you want to keep it real close to the vest, I can't do much for you, but I can definitely look at your chart and we can see what we see. See, one of the things you got to look for is this. Watch this. Let's look at the planets now. These are the planets right now. John's asking, what could be going on in my chart? Okay, first thing you say to yourself is, by God, what's going on in the zodiac? Well, the sun is approaching Pluto. See that? And it's going to get to 26 degrees, and I'm going to be getting my heart examined. 11 years after open heart surgery. I'm nervous about it. Right when the sun is opposite Pluto. You see, the doctors would have to cancel the appointment if the planets weren't lined up. They have to match. I don't know what's going to happen. I don't know whether they're going to find something or get a clean bill. But we can see in John's chart something's been going on all week. Well, the sun's been in Aquarius. The sun's been in Cancer for 3 weeks, right?
Mm-hmm.
Everybody and their brother is not looking at Eris. Here's Eris sitting there sleeping at 25. Look at the sun at 22 and a half. Here's Eris at 25. So my hunch is that since Eris and Pluto are finished with their exact square, you've probably got something going on with the Eris point because the sun is approaching the 25th degree. When it gets to 24 in 2 days, it's going to square that Eris point, which is at the tip of a T-square. See that T-square?
Yes, I do.
All right, so let's take a look at John's chart. And we'll do a John H. Okay. So there's your chart. What did I just say to you? Where's Pluto? Pluto's at 29 degrees. of Capricorn, 28 degrees. So Pluto's sitting around here. Okay? It's not opposite anything. It's not at a right angle. It's trining your Neptune. That's not to be ignored. That's something we want to keep in mind. It's trining your Neptune and it's making a square to your Venus. So this could very well involve your Venus Neptune part of your life, which can be your money or it can also be your spiritual life. Okay, one of the two. Now let's take another look. I said that the sun is getting ready to oppose Pluto. So the sun, let's just put the planets up there. Okay, this is where the planets are right now. All right. So you see the sun is approaching your ascendant. Okay? The sun is approaching your ascendant. Now, let me tell you a little story about that. This is not always, but this is about 50-50 in my experience. When the sun is going through your 12th house, it's very common, or Mars, it's very common, not always, that somebody's working behind your back. Because the 12th house is secret enemies, people you don't know about. Like I said, not always. And that person went into the weeds when the sun went into the 12th house, and that person is going to come out right when the sun gets a degree away from the ascendant. That's when you're going to know who it is. I've seen this work like clockwork. I've seen it with me. Yes and no. I've seen it with other people. No. So it's not always. Now, I found it to be more dangerous when it's Mars. When Mars goes into the 12th and when it comes out of the 12th is when you can find out if somebody's been working against your best interest. So what now is going on? It looks to me as an objective astrologer, since you have natal Pluto sitting here, and you got transiting Pluto sitting here, and you got the transiting sun going right here, that this is the story. This is the story in my mind. The sun, Pluto, which means when the sun, Pluto across the ascendant is getting activated like that, it means to me that you're asking the question. I don't care if you're a Gemini or not, or your wife is a Scorpio or not. When sun, Pluto are lining up on your ascendant, you're asking me a question. Are your relationships, and I mean all of them, are they as deep as you would like? Are they as deep and meaningful as you would like? I'm not going to say any more. I'm not going to get in any trouble. But that's what's mounting. You can see the mounting pressure. We can all feel planets coming. We feel them, we sense them coming. We even say words like that. I don't know, but I'm going to talk with her one day. I'm not sure when, but it's coming.
That's very helpful.
Okay. So with sun, Pluto, it doesn't mean something bad's going to happen or good. What it means is that the subject needs to go on to the table. That is this relationship as deep and meaningful as we really want it to be, because you cannot BS yourself through a Pluto time.
Very good.
It makes sense to you?
It does.
Okay.
Not what I was thinking, but what you're saying is true.
Well, whatever. When I got nothing to go on, I got to
Okay.
crawl out on the limb, or else I got to ask Claudia. What do you
You do
think?
pretty good yourself.
Well, I tell you. I think you're all getting the idea, and the way you're getting it is you're sticking with it week after week after week after week. And that's how you learn. You know, and it's not easy, is it, Susan? It's not. It's just not easy. Questions, statements?
I have a quick question. You talked about Venus opposite Neptune either being money or something else. I thought maybe you said.
I saw
related-
Venus and Neptune being stimulated, and that's usually money,
Right.
or it's Venus, Neptune's all about romance, especially pie in the sky romance.
So it's not in any way a creative thing, because to
Oh,
me,
it very good. Yeah.
Okay.
Sure. It could be your art. Yes. Very much.
or
Venus,
music or something, especially since I think that Venus was third house in his case, or was it Neptune? One of them was third house. And so I wonder if that could even be is music third house?
no, it's not, but Venus is. Venus is music and it's art.
Okay.
Venus is the source. It's the source of art. It's the source of music. Venus is very important. Neptune is more filmmaking, dreamy stuff.
What
Shadowy
about
stuff.
third house?
Third
that
house is
Creative expression? Because I know it's mundane expression.
third house is very much expression, but it's usually on a smaller scale, like doing a neighborhood newsletter or
Okay.
something like that, as opposed to an internet published page. It's usually on a smaller scale.
Okay.
The book is on a smaller topic. Come on, Linda. I see you're sitting there praying for something. Ask to unmute.
I didn't know, I was thinking about Venus being the root of art, and that just struck me, and I was like,
Oh, yeah.
I went off in some kind of a thing about it. It's in my
As a
head.
matter of fact, the internet just published closest picture that's ever been taken of Venus a couple days ago, and it's just marvelously silver. Venus is beautiful. Venus is very misunderstood. And you know what I'm learning? I'm learning in the past few weeks, especially this week. Libra is very misunderstood. There's a whole lot more going on with Venus, with Libras than what people think. It's a very powerful sign. They kind of act a little bit weak in a sense, which is to make them a little more subject to having a partner. But Libras are not weak. Libras are strong. They're a cardinal sign. They know what they think. Yeah, they'll argue with you all the time. That's only because they're not exactly sure what they're thinking. But once they start arguing, they're real sure. It's a funny sign, man. I tell you, I don't know how in the world it ever happened, but all 12 signs are just so unbelievably different.
So then the ruling planet for both Libra and Taurus is Venus, but it seems to come out in different ways. The common ground is.
Well, good question. In the old days, they were both ruled by Venus. Okay. And then once when Eris has been discovered, some are trying to assign Eris to Libra, which ain't gonna work. Libra is just not that disruptive. It just isn't. There's some qualities I could see why they said that, but I think they're really off track. Okay, so that for a while, when I wrote my book, I became totally convinced, that the Venus is the ruler of the Earth. So what do you do when there's no Earth on the chart? How can Earth rule Taurus when it's not even on the chart?
Right.
Well, Earth is the opposite of where the sun is. So it's complex. So the position I'm taking now is that there's somehow, we don't understand it, rulership yet. Rulership is changing. I'm pretty convinced that Earth rules Venus. I'm sorry, Earth rules Taurus. And Venus definitely rules Libra. Venus is married to Libra.
But you're happy with Mercury ruling Virgo?
Same story. In the old days, it was Mercury ruling Virgo. Mercury certainly rules Gemini. No, as I said in this book, I'm convinced that Virgo's ruled by Chiron.
Oh, Chiron, okay.
Yeah, and more and more and more. By
Yeah.
God, we got astrologers agreeing today. It's amazing. More and more astrologers are agreeing that Chiron is the ruler because of the healing wounded and the craftsmanship of Chiron. But there's no doubt when you get into these stories, there's no doubt that the old rulerships still apply. They still apply. So Mercury still definitely rules Virgo. And that's why we're having to rethink rulership itself. I tell you what, I don't know how these other guys write 5, 6, 7 books. Writing one about wore me out
I'm sure.
because you just have so many dimensions to think about. And I can't even tell you how it did my heart good to hear Ksenia last week say there's no doubt that what's been going on has been going on because of Pluto squaring Eris. She hasn't even been following Eris. I've been bugging her the past couple of months. She says there's no doubt.
Yeah.
That's the revolution. That's what nobody's seeing still. People have no idea how arisen these times are. And people are starting to get a little bit of an idea. They're starting to. Now, I'm going to be doing I want to show you this later on. I'm involved with a group called the TTC, which is Total Transformation Course. It's a 52-week Course in Miracle group that you get involved with, and you work on certain principles once a week for a year. And I got the birth date of the organization and the birth time. So I'm stunned because I remember when they formed this organization out of New Mexico. So I've got the birth time and the birth city and the birth date. So I've been invited to do a webinar with my overseeing of this TTC organization since I see what the baby looks like. And I'm going to be doing a lot of talking about that baby, its pluses and minuses as an organization. And I came up with some really major new perceptions of how to look at an organization and its Eris. And we're going to start to see how Eris is going to just start dominating that chart. It's just such a powerful planet, and it's very easy to get scared of it because it's so radical. But we've got to remember it'll do what it has to do the good stuff too. There's a real good side to it. So anyhow, thank you all for sticking with me. Who knows what we're going to do next week? Could be anything.
Right.
I may be at the beach. I might get a Winnebago in the background.
That's right.
Huh?
That's right.
I might
Sky's the
drive it.
limit.
I might drive it to Cumming, Georgia.
That's right. Come on down.
Come on now. Good night, everybody.
Good
Good
night.
night,
Thank
Rick.
you.
Good night,
Good night.
Have a
everybody.
good week.
Good night.